All right, I'm gonna bring in this Photoshop file into After Effects. So I'm gonna review this in case you missed it. All right. So I take the file that we did in Photoshop with the ground and the houses and stuff, and I'm gonna add it to the project tab of After Effects. Okay. And because this is a multiple layered file, it's gonna be composition retain layer sizes. I'm gonna hit OK, and then I'm gonna double click on this to open it, just like we did last week with the other project. All right, because we're dealing with building a background here, there'll be some extra things we gotta do. The background will be converted into a 3D layer. So I'm gonna look over here on the timeline where you have my layers, and I'm gonna activate the 3D layer control. Click, 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 or you can click and drag and make them all 3D at once. And you'll notice that 3D layers have something called X, Y, and Z. Green arrow, red arrow is, and the blue arrow. The blue is pointing at you, so that means things cannot be pulled towards you and away from you. Um, Now, to make it easier for me, I'm going to switch to two different views. Right now, I have one view. The moment you make these into 3D, you'll see a axis here to make this one view into two views. I'm going to switch to two views. And now I have two views here. Okay. I'm going to take the ground layer. Right now, the ground layer is standing up, so I want to make it flat. So if I hit the letter R, you'll notice R for rotation. Or if you look at all of these, you'll notice that you see the same controls except rotation became four different controls because it's 3D now. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take X rotation for the ground, and where it says 0.0 degrees, I'm going to make it 90 degrees so that now the ground is flat. Now, because I want this to be a ground plane, I'm gonna use the Z arrow, and I'm gonna pull it downward so that it's right below the camera. And just to as before I continue, you want to make sure that this side is an active camera, and then this side is a custom view one. If it's not set up this way, what you want to do is you want to change it here. Make sure that the right side is active camera, and when you click on this side, it is set to custom view one. Custom view one is just a third dimensional perspective of your background. See? I feel like the ground is too small. That is why you see the edges of your Photoshop layer. I don't want to see that. I want to be able to see a whole ground. And that can be fixed by just changing the size. So scale, instead of 100%, is going to be 200. So it's a much larger ground. Therefore, gives me more room to put all kinds of stuff. Now that the ground is good to go, it's nice and stable there, I'm going to close that up and maybe put a lock on it so you don't move it by accident. Now, let's talk about these hills. The hills are kind of here in the middle of the road. So what I need to do is I need to get closer to this and use, bless you, I'm going to use the Z axis to push the hills further back. Now I'm going to make this bigger because, I'm lying. I'm not going to make them bigger. I'm just going to use Y to push them down into the ground. Not too much, obviously, right? But enough to where it's sinking into the ground. So I know they're touching the ground. Maybe push it back a little bit. You'll notice here that they're going into the ground. Okay. I'm going to do the same with these houses. See, I'm going to take a house, push it into the ground. So it's like touching the ground. And I'm going to take the house, I'm going to push it into the grassy area. So it's in a grassy area, not in the middle of the road. So now I have this house and this grassy area. All right. So now I can do that. I can do that with the big house here. I can select the big house, put it into the ground, push it into the grassy area. All right. Again, you don't put it too far in because then it starts to sink in. Right. Just enough so that it's touching the ground. Now, if your houses are too big or too small, you can also change the size. If you open the controls to see the transform controls, you can scale it down by changing the percent to a lower percent, or you can make them bigger with a higher percent. Um, I feel like my red house should be bigger, so I'm going to increase the size a little bit and just make sure I realign it with the ground and put it in a place where I think is best. If I want more houses, I can just select a house and hit Command D to duplicate it. And you'll see now that I have a second house. However, when you Command D, it's going to be pasted in the same place. It's going to be duplicated in the same place. So I'm going to just move it aside so you can see the second house. And then I can, pull that in or push it away. So it's further back, wherever you want to put it. I can duplicate, if I hit Command D, have another one as a third house. And I can probably make a 2-story house out of that. If I push it back, now it's behind that. And then you can make it smaller too, so you can cheat the perspective a little bit. You could also, if you want, scale things higher so it looks slightly different. And not everything looks the same completely. Select this house and maybe bring it higher. So now that's a 2-story house. I can probably do the same with the red house. If I duplicate this house, I can probably bring that house over to the red house and then push it back. So it's behind the red house. It's like a little penthouse on top of the red house. There you go. I'm going to take these clouds and I'm going to push. You can actually select multiple things and move them together. You hold shift, select multiple things, push the clouds behind the hills so that it's, clouds that are further away. And then just put these clouds wherever you think is best. Okay. All right. Now, if I hit Command K, this is where I see the background color, which is the sky color at this point. So if I hit Command K, I'm going to click on that background color swatch and choose a sky color. Now, once I pick a sky color, I hit OK, and I have myself a sky color. Now, one of the things I like to do here is if I want to change the color of a house, because I don't want them to all be brown, I can pick a house, hit Effect, and I'm going to find something in here called Color Correction. Color Correction has something called Hue and Saturation. So Color Correction, Hue and Saturation. And I can rotate this dial. So now I have a different colored house. I can do that here too, to that house. Again, that is Effect, Color Correction, Hue and Saturation, and then change the color of the house. There. Well, that ended up being the same brown. Let me change it a little bit more. There we go. That's slightly red. Okay. You can duplicate just about anything in here. Command D, you can duplicate the hills. Command D, select that. And so now I have two hills. Maybe these hills are bigger and taller. And you just push it back so they're further away. And maybe they're a different color. I can go to Effect, Color Correction. I can do Brightness and Contrast. And change the brightness so that they're lighter because they're far away. And I have two sets of hills. Now we did some tree files some time ago, and the trees were not part of this file. They're kind of on their own Photoshop files. You can't add them to this, except we have to make some changes. If I go back into the project tab here, I can add them to the project. So I just have to now make sure this is visible and this is visible. I can bring in the bonsai tree or whatever tree you have. And instead of a composition retain layer sizes, I'm going to do footage. Because see, the tree is not sharing the layers with anything else that's going to be 3D. It'll just be by itself. So it's a footage file. So I hit OK. Now the bonsai tree is part of the project. I can just add it to the environment here. But because it appears here and not here, and that is because it is not a 3D layer. All you have to make sure is anything you add to this 3D world, it becomes a 3D layer as well. So now they are part of the shared world. Make sure it's planted into the ground. Put the tree wherever you think is best. Change the size if you need to. There we go. I can bring in the other tree. It's a cherry blossom tree. And that's also footage because it's by itself. And I can add this cherry blossom to the background, make it 3D as well. Change the size. I'm going to move the tree to a grassy area. Whoa. Make sure you use these arrows. When you see the letter, make sure that it's visible so you can actually move it. It's safe to move it that way. There, it's going into the ground. I'm planting it into the ground. Maybe I can put that cherry blossom over here. And you can also duplicate trees, just like the buildings. Select the tree, Command D. That way you can have two. You can flip it around. You can also do color correction. Select Effect, Color Correction, Hue and Saturation. And play around with the colors. Maybe I want another bonsai tree, Command D. Command D, that bonsai tree. Now I have two. And maybe this one is smaller. And you push it back, further back, so it's further away. And that could also be a different color if you want. Color correction, hue and saturation. There's a different colored bonsai. Now, in the last project, we added lights to the environment, to our animation. We can add a light to your environment. So looks like there's a sun. So if I go to Layer, New, Light, and it's going to be a spotlight with a white color intensity of 100, Because it's daytime, I'm going to stick to shadow darkness of 30%. Cast shadows must be checked as usual. So you hit OK. There's your light. And I'm going to pull the light back because it's too close to my environment. Use Z axis to pull it back. Just remember that when we add a light, that every single layer here has something called the material options. So if you open the material options, make sure your stuff is set to on and off for these settings. On and off. That's the best way to remember it. On, off. Now make sure everything has a. What I like to do to save time is I'm gonna hit Command A. It selects everything. And just make sure everything is set up the same way. Open one of the material options and you just do on and off for everything. On, off, all of them. So now everything in here is going to be casting a shadow. See? We're going to add a camera so that it comes in handy to create variations of this background. Layer, new, camera. And for this, make sure you just leave the settings alone except for one little thing. Instead of the 2-node camera, let's make it a 1-node camera. And immediately hit OK. So that, we have this camera added to your environment here. Now, the camera will be kind of off screen, but you'll see that whatever you have your camera showing will be appearing on this side. So if I move this camera forward using Z, you'll see what the camera is looking at. You can move it sideways and you'll see the third dimensional effect on your background. Just don't move it too far because you start seeing some Photoshop edges. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you build your 3D background.